Hello.
Hi, Shaunak.
Hi. You can hear me, right?
Yes,
Okay,
absolutely.
okay. Just
Yeah.
wanted to confirm.
Yeah. So we'll wait for 5 more minutes
Yeah,
because
that's
participants are joining.
yeah, that's okay.
Yeah, sure. Manikanda, can you ask your teammates to join, please?
Okay, ma'am. I already posted a message.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Farooq sir, can you ask your team to join because we are running out of time. So every day, Naveen Joshi, can you ask your teams to join, team members to join, please? Can you message them? Rahul Reddy sir, can you ask your team members to join? Can you message them? You just ping them so that they'll join. Harika, can you ask your team members to join the session? Can you please ping them? Good afternoon. Welcome to ACHARYA 3.0 FDP Entrepreneurship Development Program. So today we have with us Mr. Shaunak Devastale. And the topic that we are going to discuss today is pitch decks, that is elevator, startup deck and investment deck. And Mr. Shaunak Devastale is managing partner at SB Gokhale and chartered accountants. So, Mr. Shaunak, can you hear me? Are you with us?
Yeah, I can hear you. Hello? Hello?
Yes. Shaunak, the house is all yours and start. Join, so we
can you allow me to share my screen, please?
Anyway, you can go ahead. Yes, I am doing it. Yeah, you can share it now.
1 second. No, I'm still unable to do that. Acha, okay. Right. So are you able to see this? Hello?
Yeah.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So let me start by giving a brief introduction of Arthayan, which is an entity that I am a part of. So we are essentially what we call a startup ecosystem enabler, wherein we connect relevant startups with relevant investors based on the investment thesis that has been created by venture capitalist funds that we have on our platform. So we have developed our own technology to identify a startup based on VC thesis, and we have our own matching algorithm which connects relevant startups with relevant VCs. Now, some of the features on the platform are one, startup matching. The second is you can schedule meetings on the platform itself. And the third feature is there is sort of a Kanban style chart which is available for VCs. So they have their entire deal tracking system on the platform. Now at Funding Quest, we essentially have a platform which connects startups with VCs, and we do not charge any kind of success fee for doing that. And the VCs that we have on our platform are essentially institutional investors. So there is no question of them being unprofessional or in any way, and therefore the deal time required to convert a deal from its nascent stage to actual funding is significantly lower. And also we have tied up with a lot of corporates like Paytm, for example, and a few others like AWS, Amazon Web Services, and they offer a host of free credits to our incubated or our partner startups. Now this is what we have been able to achieve till now. We have connected with 130 plus investors. We have about 70 plus partner incubators connected with us. Always we run cohorts or we do discussions like we are doing right now. There are about 5,000 plus startups that are connected with us, and we have about 500 plus conversations that we have initiated on the platform. Now going to the topic at hand, the topic that I was given was essentially a brief about how we can create a pitch deck. But to understand that, we need to first understand what a pitch deck is. So essentially, saying a pitch deck is an ambassador of your business that represents your business outside, outside your own sphere. Therefore, the pitch deck that is being created for your business shall encapsulate all the core values or core things that you as a business hold to be true. And the pitch deck also represents your business in front of investors and in front of other stakeholders as well. Now, taking this up with an example, generally when startups approach investors for investment, there are two things that happen. The one possibility is that the VC will immediately ask him to do a short pitch to him, wherein he can, then then the startup can use this pitch deck as a sort of guiding tool for his pitch. The other possible instance that might happen, and which is more likely to happen, is that the VCs generally ask the startups to mail their pitch decks to them, and thereafter they have their own method of scrutinizing the pitch decks, and then they sort of get back to the startup basis the data that they see in the pitch deck. Now the problem here is that if your pitch deck is not good enough, even though you might have a great idea or you might have a great concept and you might possibly be able to build a great business, but if you are not able to convey that via your pitch deck, your investor will never have the confidence to call you back. And therefore, if you don't have a pitch deck which is in line with your business idea, you might not receive the much warranted call that investors make, and you might lose on opportunities that might would have come across your way. Therefore, a pitch deck is a very essential part of your entire funding strategy. Now, in this session, rather than giving brief unactionable inputs on pitch deck, what I thought was to summarize the entire contents of the pitch deck into 13 points that every pitch deck must have. So some some might have 14, some might have 15, but at least these points should be covered by each startup while making their pitch deck. So I'll just go through all the line items once, and then we can discuss them a little more in depth. So the first is the cover slide. So the cover slide is basically the introduction page of your business or your company, which will just in short have a have your name and a line which states what your business is currently doing. The second side is the team slide. So the team slide will cover the number of founders that you have with you, the sort of team that you are building. Also, if you have any advisory board as such, details of such advisory board on or and so on and so forth. So that is the team slide for you in short. The third point is the issue or pain point that you are trying to solve. That is, the core reason for your existence as a business, because that will show, as a business what you are trying to achieve. That should be covered in the third slide in any pitch deck. The next is the product or the technology overview. So whatever product that you are trying to build or any technology that you are trying to build, a brief overview of that technology or that product should be included in the deck. You need not go into how the technology is built or any complexities, but a brief overview is good enough at this time. The next is the business model. So this is once you have a product or you have a technology built, how do you plan to monetize that technology and turn it into a viable business model? So that is what should be covered in this slide. The next is size of the market, which covers your TAM, SAM, SOM, which are basically parameters for how much the business can grow in the market, or what is the growth potential of the business in the market. The next slide is current traction, which sort of shows where you stand as of today. How much funds have the promoters infused? What is the stage of product development, and so on. The next slide is competitive landscape. That is how many investors, how many people are in the same line of business that you are in. Who are your competitors, and what sort of edge do you have over and above your competitors? That is covered in this slide. The next one is financial projections, wherein you sort of uh, try to gauge what once funding is received, what will be the possible revenue outcomes, or what will your North Star metrics look like after you have received funding. So that is covered in financial projections. The next slide is funding needs. That is how much money you plan to raise, and essentially what do you plan to do with the money once you have raised that money. So that will be covered in this slide. The next one is current equity structure. That is what is the shareholding pattern in your company? What does the cap table look like? Who are the shareholders in your company, and so on. And the last point that everyone should have in their deck is an exit option. As in, how are you planning to, give the investor a decent return? How are you planning to give the investor an exit? So that is one of the most crucial points in, any investment decision by any investor. So that should be covered in the last slide. So now we will go across each one and each of these points in greater detail. So the first point being the cover slide. So the cover slide should essentially have your name and logo in place. Now, with respect to logo, what I can suggest is since that is something that is created only once, that logo should be representative of what you want your company to, have an image as, and therefore it might be a good investment to seek professional help in designing your logo, because that sort of has an impact on your brand image. And yeah, the second thing that you should cover is essentially your contact details as a promoter, which will include your mail ID, your perhaps LinkedIn ID, and and your contact number. The reason that you put all these details in the pitch deck is if an investor wants to get in touch with you, we do not, want him to have a tough time in doing that. So all these details should be covered in the contact details. The next point is URL, that is the link for your website perhaps, or the link for your if you have an application developed, then the link for your application in the app store. Again, the reason behind giving this data point is that the investor or his analyst will not be, will not require to find out what your website actually is or where your app is located in the app store. They might simply be able to copy paste the URL and will be able to reach, your app or your website, and that saves a lot of time and, sort of restricts the barriers that are in place till the funding is raised. The last is the line is the most important line in the cover slide. So the line should sort of sum up your business in one or more or than one or couple of sentences. Now, only last month I was there in a pitch event. So in that pitch event, a startup had a very peculiar line. What he said was, "We are the Ola, but for bikes." So that sort of summed up his entire business model as such, and I did not have to ask him even a single question after that as to, how you're planning to grow, or what market size you have, or so on, because that sort of summarized the market that he was being in. So it might not be possible for every business to simplify it to that level, but an effort must be made to, make it plain and simple. So that is it about the cover slide. Moving on to the team slide. So there is a very famous saying in the VC circle that VCs invest money in teams and not in companies. And that is very true with respect to at least, early stage startups. Since in an early stage startup, you do not have, you just have an idea. You do not have a business as such. Perhaps you might not even have a minimum viable product or an MVP, nor would you have a great technology. So it is the team that will define the success or failure of the organization. And thus, in any pitch deck, if that is the situation in your business, you need to put your best foot forward and, showcase your team in a great light. Now, the essential features in this slide would be the kind of team or the teammates that you have, which will include your co-founders, or if you have a key managerial person, and so on. And across each person's name, his designation as a founder or co-founder or KMP should be mentioned. It also might be a good idea to indicate the number of shares that each team member is holding, because that is a very key insight that investors want to have a look at. So that addition should also be made. Also, the role that each team member is going to play in the organization should also be mentioned. And sort of some care should be taken that the background of the team member and the role that he is going to play in the organization has some sort of sync with it. For example, if I am a pharmacy student, I should not ideally be a head of IT or head of technology, since I do not have relevant experience in creating technology. So that is sort of something that needs to be looked at. The next slide is the issue or pain point that the startup is trying to solve. So in this slide, at least three things should be mentioned. One is the current scenario that where the current market is at, or what the current scenario is. Now this will, or let's take an example of Ola, for example, or Uber. In their scenario, what used to happen was there was no predictability as to when when your taxi, when you will be able to take a ride, when your taxi will come, and that was the pain point that they were trying to solve essentially. So that they need to mention in the pitch deck what is the current scenario that exists. Then you need to mention how your product is going to solve the current scenario, how you are going to bring a change in the product scenario. And lastly, you need to mention how your product is slightly different than the existing products. Also, this is a slide wherein you can do a sort of brand differentiation, wherein there are essentially three types of products. One product is a completely brand new product which is launched in a market which has never seen that product, but that is rarely a case. The second and third type is a product which has something better than the existing product. For example, if we take the case of Orkut and Facebook was somewhat similar to what Orkut was doing. It was a social media platform, but it had features that Orkut did not have, and eventually Orkut went out of business. So that is another scenario wherein you have launched a product which is slightly better than the existing products. And the third scenario possibly is that you have launched a product which is comparable to the existing product, but which is at a lower price than the existing product. So even that is a value addition that you can give to an end customer. So of these three types, where does your product stand? That needs to be mentioned in this slide. The next point is product technology overview. So in this slide, what you need to do is highlight the uniqueness in the product. So essentially, you need to sort of differentiate why your technology or why your product is better than any other product without going into a lot of technicalities or a lot of nitty-gritties. For example, if you have developed, let's say, a UPI-like system wherein you can transfer money from one mobile to another, rather than going into detail about how the entire backend works or how you are able to transfer, how different devices connect with each other, merely what you can state here is that the end product is that you can transfer money from one mobile to another, and that is the end of it. That is the only thing that will ideally matter. So that is something that you should incorporate in this slide. And the reason behind not going into technicalities is a lot of time the analysts who are considering your proposal will not essentially be experts in your area of business. For example, I will have no idea about how a chemical industry or how two chemicals mixing will have an impact. But if I am able to understand what the end product is achieving, then I will be in a better position to understand what the company is about. So therefore, limit the technicalities at this juncture and just focus on what your product is trying to solve. Also, in this scenario, it is essential to mention if you have created any barriers to entry. Now, barriers may be in the form of an IP that you have or a copyright that you have. Again, in case of some people, what I have seen is, especially people who are scientists, that they have good hold of technology. They are able to create amazing products, but they are not able to market those products. So for entrepreneurs which fall into these categories, licensing these products by creating IPs might be a possible scenario to monetize their talent. So again, if you have created some sort of a barrier, that should be mentioned in this slide. The next is the business model. So this is a slide wherein you basically explain how you are planning to monetize your product or technology. That is, how do you plan to intend to make money from selling the product or selling the services that you have developed. Now, in this slide, it is a very good very good idea to sort of incorporate your marketing strategy. Now, investors are typically very keen in investing in companies which are not founder centric. That is, every role in the organization should not be done by founders. There should be a process for everything, right from sales to execution. So, here it might be a good idea to write in short about how you are planning to develop your marketing strategy or how you are planning to develop your sales funnel, and that will give the investors an idea about the growth potential in your company. Something that I would like to highlight is that a revenue forecast or quantification of revenue is not at all required at this juncture. That is something that if the investors are interested in your company, they will ask from you in any case. So that need not be elaborated at this point of time. We can take it up later anyhow. The next point is size of the market. So by size we mean TAM, SAM, and SOM. So let us understand what these terms are. TAM is the total addressable market. For example, if I consider that my product has applications for every Indian, then my TAM will be 1.4 billion people. SAM is the serviceable market. For example, if I have a service limitation of, let's say, one state, for example, Maharashtra, then my SAM would be the people living the entire population of Maharashtra. And SOM is the serviceable operatable market, which means that out of Maharashtra, what is the realistic possibility that how many people I will be able to service in the next 3 or 4 years. So that is my ideal SOM. So these three numbers are very critical for any investor before deciding in the whether to invest in a company or not. Because many a times what happens is you might have created a great product or you might have created a great technology, but if the application of the product or the technology is not widespread, that is if there are not sufficient number of people that will be willing to pay for that product or technology, then your business has a limited growth potential, and that is something that investors are very wary about. They need to they want to invest in businesses which have a very big market size and very big growth potential. So these three numbers are very key to understand if a business is investable or not. Again, in this slide, what I would say is your plans to capture this market need not be mentioned, since that is covered perhaps slightly in the previous slide. But just the total quantification of revenue potential of your particular business should be mentioned in this slide. The next slide is current traction. So essentially, this tries to summarize where you as a company stand as of today. Now, this can be bifurcated into two separate, company types. Ones which are pre-revenue and ones which are post-revenue. For companies which are pre-revenue in nature, what you can do is you can try to summarize, how your product development is going on and which stage of the product development cycle your company currently is in. And for companies which which have revenue, which have started selling their products or services, you can try to summarize what is your current sales in the perhaps the last financial year and current financial year, and total sales that you have achieved. Also, total number of customers that you have serviced. That is another indicator that you can give in current traction. And even if you haven't generated any revenue, there are certain metrics which are essentially called North Star metrics. So, what are North Star metrics? So, North Star metrics are essentially parameters in a company which will not directly contribute, which will directly contribute to revenue, but which are not contributing to revenue right now. For example, in an aggregator model like Ola, the number of customers that you have onboarded and the number of drivers that you have, these parameters might be summarized as North Star metrics for Ola or Uber. Because ultimately, when this number grows up substantially, the revenue is going to flow in any case. So these metrics, if you have in your business, then you can identify them and sort of try to put it in front of investors as to where you stand as a company. The next slide is a competitive landscape. So what this slide essentially wants to compare is where you stand as a business with respect to your competitors. Now I have met with a lot of startups, and generally what their take is that they do not have any competitors in their particular space. But that is I find it very hard to believe, since it is very difficult to find a product which has absolutely zero competitors in today's world. So I want founders to be very open about who their competition is, because that is nothing to be afraid of. If the addressable market is large enough, both these competitors can easily coexist and survive. So that is not a problem. So what you need to do is you need to identify whoever your closest competitor is, and you need to understand and try to bring out what differentiates you from the competition. Now, this differentiation might be in terms of superior technology or superior execution skills, but merely by putting in a tabular chart stating that your services are better will not suffice. You need to provide something good, something concrete to the investors. So one concrete possibility might be a better execution plan, but then you need to have an execution plan that you can show to the investors. So this is the slide wherein you answer the question why us and why not our competitors. The next slide is the financial projection slide. So this is basically you need to summarize and try to gauge what is your funding requirement and what is your opex and that is operational expenses and capital expenses required for your company to grow, and then try to understand what is the sort of revenue that you might be able to achieve in the next perhaps 3 years. Now a possibility here might be that a startup might say that they do not plan to have a MVP developed in the next 3 years, but generally it is about 1.5 years is considered as a sufficient time to at least develop a product which is at an MVP stage, and thereafter ideally your sales cycle or your sales should slowly start initiating. So generally, even if it is any company, you need to have a rough forecast of what your next 3 years might look like. The second point being, you need to have an understanding of what your capex, that is the cost that you are incurring towards building a product or building a technology is, and your general operating expenses, whatever they are, you need to mention them in this slide. And the last point is the unit economics of any business, which is the most important factor in any business. So unit economics, what I mean to say is, if you sell a product for 10 rupees and you are making that product for 6 rupees, 4 rupees is your profit. That is the unit economics in your business. That is the last scale, in which you are making profit in your business. So these things you should be very aware of before going to investors, and they should be a part of your deck as well. The next slide is the slide of funding needs. So in this slide, you need to mention what is the amount that you are planning to raise. Now, before answering this question and before writing the amount, you need to do your own homework as to what is your capital capex need and what is your opex need. Also, you should keep in mind that raising funds is a very time consuming and very hectic activity, and you should not be in a position to raise funds in the next 6 months once you have raised funds today. So your horizon should at least be 1.5 years. That is whatever funds that you will require to sustain your company for 1.5 years. That should be what your ask is essentially from the investors. So you need to calculate this number before putting it in the deck. Also, what you need to do is you need to have a plan for how do you want to spend this money, and the breakup of how do you want to spend this money. Now the breakup might look like spending towards technology or product building, spending towards marketing, spending towards internal team formation, and so on and so forth. But you need to provide a breakup of how these funds are going to be utilized. Also, you need to, as I said, you need to have an understanding of how long these funds will last and when your next possible fundraise is going to be, and that should also be a part of your deck. The last thing that you need to mention in this slide is that what are the targets that you plan to achieve by going into this fundraise, and yeah, what are the whatever the targets are that you want to achieve in this fundraise should be a part of this slide, and as far as possible you need to achieve them as well. Now the next one is the current equity structure that you have in your company, that will showcase your current cap table as it looks like who is holding shares in your company, what is the structure in which people are holding shares in your company, and so on and so forth. Also, any previous rounds that you have had, for example, if you have raised funds previously, then you can showcase here at what valuation you have raised funds previously, and that should be a part of this current equity structure slide. The last slide in your deck is the exit options that you will be providing to investors. Now, every investor wants exit. So, if there are documented exits in your industry before, that showcases a confidence that the industry as such is doing very well. And if there are instances of such, then you should definitely mention these instances in your deck. If there are no instances, then you should have an idea about where how you are going to give them an exit, whether it is going to be at a series A, B level, or whether you are planning for an IPO. Everything will not most likely be clear at this stage, but perhaps you can try to answer this question in perhaps try to have a better understanding of your business and try to answer this question. Now, some points to remember. So this was all about the pitch deck, but there are some other softer aspects to fundraising. So one is that raising funds from an investor is like getting married essentially. So the investor will have a say in the decision making of your company, and each and every action that you take henceforth will be vetted by these investors, or will need an approval from these investors at some stage. And it is not only the kind of money that these investors will bring in, it is also their expertise in scaling businesses. For example, they have worked with countless startups before you, and also their connections across industry that will prove to be more pivotal than the amount that they are raising for you. Also, your growth is in their best interest as well, since their valuation will increase as you are growing as well. So finding the right investor, irrespective of who is putting in money, is much more important than just going after money. So that is something that all startups, need to have a very deep thought on. The next thing that startups need to know is that significant preparation is required before the fundraise. So you should at least have a runway of about 6 months to 1 year before from when you start to raise funds, because at least it takes 6 months to a year perhaps to finish the fundraising part. So for that, what you need to do is you need to identify investors which are prevalent in your industry or your space. Of course, there are several sector agnostic investors, but there are some investors that invest in very specific spaces. So you need to have an understanding of who they are, and you need to shortlist investors who have not previously invested in companies which are very similar to you, because you will be their direct competition as such. And you need to slowly and simultaneously build a network and stay connected with these investors, so that when the time comes to actually raise funds, you will be in a better position to call them up and communicate with them. Now, the next point is very intuitive, that whoever you feel is the most likely person to invest in your company, you should not be the first to approach him. Rather, you should approach investors who are not directly connected with you earlier, so that you gain experience in kind of questions that they ask and the type of reaction that you get. And once you are the last point here is that as a startup, you should have complete clarity on the structure in which you are willing to take investment. So there are countless structures in which you can take investment, like issue of equity shares or perhaps issue of preference shares, non-convertible debentures, redeemable, irredeemable preference shares, and there are a lot of options, other options like iSafe notes as well. But you need to have internal clarity on the kind of structure that you want an investor to come in with, and you should suggest this structure to the investor as well, so that the fundraising process is shortened by that period. Now, from the investor's perspective, this is something that I have learned over the many years that I have been working in this field. Generally, what investors prefer is a 2 to 3 founder team. The reason behind that is it's not like they will not invest in a single founder team. The reason behind not investing in a single founder team is they are totally dependent on that one person to run their business, and they have invested 10, 15, 20 crores in the business. And if that person gets cold feet, or if for some reason he is not able to perform, then they are in a very big soup. So to avoid these things, they generally invest in companies which have more than one founder. They'll definitely like to invest in a company which has a team in place. That is, every co-founder has a specific role in the organization, which is complementary to the roles of other co-founders, and they work in tandem as a team, and they are able to achieve better results as a team. So that is structure in which investors are most happily likely to invest in. Also, advisory board will help establish your credibility in front of investors. So if that is possible for you, then I would strongly suggest that you go for setting up an advisory board of very prominent people. The next point is that investors generally like startup founders who have skin in the game. So by skin in the game, what I mean is they have invested a certain amount of money in the business, or they do not have any other distractions other than the entity that they are working for. So in some cases, what I have seen is founders have more than one entities that they are part of, and they are sharing time between these entities. And in such instances, investors generally do not want to invest because they are not sure of if their entity will get first priority or not. So that is another aspect that investors have a very keen eye on, and founders should have a note of that. Lastly, some practical tips. So one will be you need to own the pitch deck. So ideally, you should not read from the pitch deck, but you should have a way of words and converse with the investors, or paint a picture in the minds of investors with respect to your business plan. The second is visual graphics like graphs, pie charts, bar lines. They generally work as they are more easier to understand than text. So that if it is possible, then definitely go for that. Again, in terms of pitching to investors, it is generally advised that you should not go as a group, like 3 or 4 founders should not ideally go. 2 founders is considered to be the ideal ideal ratio for pitching to any investor, because one might be a CEO and other might be the one who handles the technology part. So that is a combination that is desirable while pitching to any investor. Then having validated data like on TAMSAM or any other aspect of your pitch deck does wonders in front of investors, because it not only showcases your strength but also your deep research in the company. So that definitely helps. Now, in terms of great ideas, founders generally are in love with what their idea is and their technology, and they fail to understand that perhaps it is not necessarily solving a very deep riddled problem in the market. And sometimes that is the reason that products or companies tend to fail. So it is only a great idea if the addressable market that you are trying to reach out to thinks it's a great idea. Merely founders thinking that their idea or their technology is great has a very little value to an investor. The next part being getting funded is not equal to success. So that is very true. We have seen countless companies like WeWork, for example, which were heavily funded and had tons of money, but ultimately they failed to create value and essentially failed. So raising funds is not equivalent to success. Building a great business, with irrespective of funding from any investor, that is most certainly the way ahead. Is what I definitely feel. And the last point that I would like to stress is in some cases I have seen that founders at some point of time realize that their product or service is not gaining traction in the market. However, they continue to pursue the same venture irrespective of the indications that they are getting from the market. If you see very successful founders, most of them have not been successful in their first venture. So it took them 1 2 3 ventures to find the right business in which they wanted to be and then grow it from there. So if at any point of time you feel that the startup is not working out, or there is clear evidence that the startup is not working out, you should definitely let go of the venture, but never let go of the entrepreneurship spirit. So that's my take on pitch deck. That's it. Thanks.
The house is open for questions. So if you have any questions, please unmute yourself and ask the questions to Sean. The house is open now. Can you ask any questions if you have?
Hello, sir.
Hi.
Hello.
Yeah.
Yeah, hello, sir.
Namaste.
So thank you, sir, for a very informative session. Sir, if our students have an idea, so can you support us regarding this particular funding assistance?
As in, what sort of support do you require?
Like if for converting their idea into a business proposal. Yeah.
So honestly speaking, that is the founder's job. So merely an idea, it is not possible for anyone to convert it into a business other than the founders. What the most I can do is perhaps have a word with them about what their thought process is, and maybe I can perhaps help them out in certain way.
So if they are ready with the business proposal, you can give the funding sort of any assistance required. So like linking with the VC.
So as I said, we have a platform. So I can share a link of the platform with you, and you can register on the platform for that.
Okay. They need to register on the platform.
Right.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Shona, for volunteering. Hello, am I audible to you all?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much for volunteering your time and giving the inputs on pitch deck and startup deck and elevator pitch. Really helpful for our participants because they have started working on the project, and We are really looking forward to have more kind of sessions like this. Thank you so much, Shaunak.
And thanks, Shaheen.
And dear participants, as I said that like start working on your projects because you have time to discuss, explore. Yes, thank you, Shaunak.
Thanks. All right.
Yes. Yeah. So I'm again reminding you because like, you at the last moment, you cannot do everything. Out of experience, I'm telling you, start working on the projects and start discussing at least what should be there in the project and what is the purpose of the project and everything, so that it will give you idea and it will be easier for you to present your idea. So that's all for today, and we'll meet tomorrow. Maybe, not tomorrow, day after, that is on 4th, with another speaker and with another topic. Till then, I hope, take care and bye.